Good evening. My name is Kevin Talma. I'm a landscape architect, among other things. I'm going to talk about wealth today and how I see wealth. Wealth for me is being happy. And what makes me happy? Very simple things. I need a little house over my head, a little food to eat. I need love and a relationship with family, friends, and community. You can mix in a little spiritual health. And last but not least is a healthy relationship with the built and unbuilt environment. When I was growing up, like Alex said, I was a happy kid, and I noticed certain things that made me unhappy. And there was one thing that made me palatably unhappy, and that was when I would see a vista to the sea disappear, or a pasture just turn into roads and houses, all in the name of development and progress as Barbados got wealthier. And it was the one thing that I could relate to that made me feel not well. And it is probably what led me to landscape architecture. In landscape architecture, a couple of years ago, I came across this word which defined it for me. And I believe in this word better than some people believe in religion. And the word is biophilia. Biophilia. You know, it's always great to come up with something that defines something that you knew was true all along. And biophilia is love of life, love of living things, you know, and it makes sense to me. There's no way that we can divorce ourselves from nature. Human beings are animals, and they're part of the natural world, and we're part of natural systems. So it reinforces that that's what makes things happen. We have to relate to the natural world. Obviously, biophilia, as I went into landscape architecture, became a kind of a ground, well, the word is, I'm not sure I'm going to find the right word, but it basically was a basis for design in nature. Landscape architecture, I define it as the creation of outdoor spaces and places. When we go to landscape architecture school, we learn about how to use nature and plants and mix that with line, form, color, texture, smell, sounds, people, culture, and come up with great spaces and places. And, you know, it's all fun. Unfortunately, I've had colleagues tell me that after they graduate from landscape architecture school, they say they're depressed because they get back home and they realize that no one knows what a landscape architect is and what they do. And I say, yeah, that's true. But the other side of the coin is it opens up all spheres of creativity for us. Because we're not defined by the general public, we can do whatever we want. But we still do get the question to come and look at our neighbors' lawns and stuff like that. But we move on. And as most of us, as we start to practice, especially in the Caribbean, we'll probably end up working in the field of tourism, real estate development, commercial development. Every now and then you might get the opportunity to do an environmental impact assessment, and even less you may get to work on a public project, and that's the kind of the exception to the rule. There's a midlife point that you hit where you kind of realize that you've been working hard, you've been learning your craft, you've been getting better at it, but you realize that you work for 5% of the population. There's this very small part of society that we've been working on for the last 20 years, that we help them create wealth in their projects. And we say, but what happened to the other 95% of our neighbors that we live around? You know, where do they live? Where do they work? Where do they play? And what does it look like? Is it healthy? Is it a nice place to be? And, you know, that's our midlife crisis. That's where we realize that, you know, we got more to do because we have a lot more people to work for. So the first word I kind of threw at you was biophilia. The second word I'd kind of say is in the wheelhouse of landscape architecture is the word imagine. That's what we do. We reimagine old spaces, we imagine new spaces. And what I'm going to do is just show you a couple examples of how you could imagine spaces for that 95% of the population that require landscape architecture as we see it, or beautiful spaces to live in and healthy spaces to be in. So it's a chorus. Imagine. Imagine if we had an emerald green necklace of parks and plazas that go through our urban environments. These slides is of one particular project that has been imagined, it has been designed, and it's in the progress of being built. But imagine what we could do with Broad Street and Bay Street. Imagine something as simple as a sugarcane cart track. I have friends that do off-road cycling, and they tell me they can get from Christchurch to St. Joseph and hardly hit tarmac. So imagine if we develop these resources for visitors and locals to experience rural Barbados. Imagine our gullies, if they weren't dumping grounds, but rather were ecological treasures that sorted out, biodiversity and water for us, and that we could actually recreate in. We took a walk in Lancaster Gully, and I could imagine walking through Lancaster Gully and ending up at Lime Grove Retail Center for an espresso, and then taking a swim in Old Town Beach. Imagine. Well, there's a good one. Our streets, our streets are dirty. I don't know, but I actually went for a few years where I didn't really know about the streets because I was driving. I was very happy to be driving my car. But, you end up on the streets sooner or later. And the streets are dirty, dangerous places. They're not really, other than a few exceptions, they're not really nice places to be. But I can imagine streets that accommodate cycling, pedestrians, retail, landscape, and landscape infrastructure. Give me a river back on my street. Give me a bioswale. Give me a bridge that is not just a walkover, but actually put a park on my bridge and make a biocorridor across the road. So I can imagine all these things. Imagine a playground. What I see most of the time is a kind of very banal place that is defined by chain link fencing. Imagine a place where kids could take risks. They could see art, they could produce food, they could play in water. Imagine if we didn't have the boardwalk. I could not find a photograph pre-boardwalk, but that is a great example of a space that was not open to the public, and it became accessible by a boardwalk, and Barbadians and visitors can experience the coastal landscape in that area, and I think that's a big one. Imagine derelict spaces turned into community gardens where people could commune together, they could produce food. But I have to tell I had a little lie there. We haven't got that far yet. This particular photograph is actually an image from a 5-star hotel that developed an organic garden to produce food for their customers. And an interesting part of that story was that they had a weekly garden tour that was very popular. And now this organic garden is the kind of crowning glory of that tour. So after the visitors, they look at the pools and the fountains and the ornamental plants, they end up in the organic garden, getting their hands dirty and learning about food. For me, that's big. That's a cultural shift. That's a shift in values, which has to happen for all these things I've talked about. That's a shift in values that I had not seen in the last 10 years. So, that's a particularly interesting project for me. And finally, these 3 images kind of represent typical Barbadian landscapes: a nice East Coast beach, a agricultural field, urban fabric of Bridgetown. Imagine if we didn't have those spaces, how poor we would be. So my clarion call is to think about development in a different way. If we continue to develop where the process is we scrape the earth, we fill it with compacted marl, and we cover it with concrete and asphalt, we'll definitely be the poorer for it, and we will not be wealthy, and we will not be happy. Now, I think the alternative is to look for ways to use natural processes and nature as the building blocks for all that we do, a switch in values and how we develop. And I'm sure that will make us wealthy, and I will be happy for sure. I'll be happy. I don't know how I'll get paid, but I will be happy. Thank you very much.